Mr. Kirby, why do you think your artwork is so popular?
My artwork is popular because it connects with the ordinary person, and they can understand it very easily. And I've always meant it to be so. I've never confined my art to a particular section of humanity. I love people in general. My art reflects it, and that's the way it's always been.
And when did you start actually get your first work published?
Well, I think I began in the animation field, and I did work for small syndicates, which rapidly went out of business, and so I kept to the animation field. I was involved with the Fleischer Studios. I did Betty Boop, and many of the products that the Fleischer brothers were involved with. But that it didn't last too long, and I went on to other things. I did editorial cartoons for, like I said, smaller syndicates. And at that time, there was a lot of turbulence in Europe, and that became material for my cartoons. And I absorbed that material and reflected it in my work. And so I've always tried to do the timely thing. And the timely thing, I think, is what people understand. I try to stay current, and you'll find my work throughout the years has changed with the times and has fit into the times in which it was drawn. Well, my first comic book work, it involved comics that didn't last long until I finally began to work on Captain America. I began to work on the early stuff at Marvel Comics, which is at that time known as Timely Comics. I met my former partner, Joe Simon, at that time, and we began to do very well together. We did work for DC magazines. We did work for Harvey magazines, and generally I brought home my paycheck and I was quite content. Well, romance comics was an innovation. I passed the newsstands every night on my way to deliver stuff to Marvel, and these love magazines would be hanging on the newsstands, and I thought nothing of it until one night it suddenly dawned on me that the love pulps were covering the newsstands, and I realized that there were no romance magazines in comics. And that's when Joe Simon and I began to turn out magazines like My Date, Young Romance, and similar magazines, and we got a very good response. Well, the monster comics were creatures of the 50s, and the monsters were not part of the comic field. Well, we're not seen in comics for quite some time until the 50s came, and I realized that there were no monster comics at all at that time, and I felt that that would be a new turn in the field, and of course it became that. I began to do monster comics. They sold very well, and I felt justified in my judgment of the times. Well, the Fantastic Four was another team adventure, and it gave me a chance to draw teenagers once more. And of course, Reed Richards was their mentor, and the characters and I had a wonderful time. I put them through all kinds of adventures. They were spectacular characters. Reed Richards could stretch himself for a mile, and the characters themselves would create the situations, and it was a kind of a series that became a classic in the field. Captain America is a product of his time. At that time, we were on the brink of war. Hitler was grabbing everything in sight, and Captain America just had to come into being because patriotic fervor was everywhere. And so Captain America became the symbol of everything that was happening in America. And of course, I had Captain America beating up on Hitler on the covers of the comic magazines, and Captain America breaking into Nazi strongholds. And he did those daring things which Americans dreamt of doing and were on the brink of doing, but we were still biding our time. And of course, the war finally happened, and Captain America still blossomed, still sold, and became the symbol of what America stood for, and he still is. My character's relationship with the reader is my own relationship. I love people in general, and that's reflected in my characters. My characters are very human, and the next guy recognizes himself in any character I draw, no matter how fantastic that character is. The next guy will always relate to him because despite the fact that he's incapable, the next guy is incapable of doing these superhuman tasks, his motivations and the character's motivations are exactly alike. They're human reactions, and the reader recognizes that, and he recognizes that factor even in the villains. Well, the cosmic characters represent omnipotence, and I felt that we always had contact with that kind of thing. All our myths, all our legends reflect our addiction to create legends. And I feel that's a human quality. And I felt that I had that quality within myself. And I created my own myths, my own gods, the new gods. I felt there should be new gods since we've always been using the old gods. So I felt that it was time to create a new kind of legend for my readership. And I did. The New Gods was the product of that. And Mr. Miracle was the product of that. And the initial characters that generated this type of magazine, I had already begun to put into my stories. And they became the foundation for these new legends. And of course, these legends stand today. They'll probably become classics that'll go into the 22nd century because they're timeless. The characters are timeless. And we'll always have that kind of character. I'm sure that someday somebody will create new legends. In fact, they're doing it already in some of the newer books. The younger people have that kind of grasp, and they're doing some wonderful, wonderful things, and I admire them immensely for it.